Hey Peepsy Doodles! So today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make a protection dragon's egg out of clay. Now I have told you guys in the past, well, we kind of started a series on making dragon's eggs and then I stopped and people got really mad at me, and I'm sorry for that. It's just the way I am as a person. I apologize. So I'm kind of fixing that by kind of continuing, but I'm going to be making a mini dragon's egg. So not only are you going to learn how to make a mini dragon's egg, but you're also going to be learning how to turn it into a protection amulet. So I'm kind of taking the normal dragon eggs that I make and putting a magical twist on it. These, like I said, these are the mini ones. In the past, I was telling you guys how to make the large ones, so you just take the basic concept that we're going to be learning about on this one and just turn it into a larger egg. That's totally fine. So there's going to be two parts to this. This first part, I'm going to be telling you guys what you need for the clay egg, and then what you need for the ingredients that you're going to be used to filling the egg. And then in part two, we're going to be actually making the egg. So part two might be a little bit longer. I'm going to try to edit it as much as possible, but it's probably just going to be a longer video, and I apologize. Trying to think of what else I need to tell you, but I think that's pretty much it. So let's get going on what you need. We're going to start out with what you need for the dragon's egg. Alrighty, so let's talk about the actual physical dragon egg and what you're going to need to make that. So there's a lot of things here, and I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible or tell you things you can use instead of other things, but just know that this has been a craft that I've kind of been working on for quite a while, so I have a lot of things to help me with my dragon eggs. So first of all, you're going to need a core. So for this particular egg, we are making mini ones. There are also the big ones that you guys have probably seen that I sell on Etsy. We are making a mini protection dragon egg. So these, I believe, are either 1.5 or 2 inch of the paper mache eggs. You can buy them at Hobby Lobby is the only craft store that I've actually personally found them at. You may be able to get them at Michael's. I don't know, I haven't found them at Joann's, but I've also found them on Amazon, and that is where I've started to buy them in bulk. So this is either a 1.5 inch or a 2 inch paper mache egg, and then the large ones I believe are 4 inch paper mache eggs. So that is, if you're going to look on Amazon, I'll try to remember to put a link in the description for them, but they are paper mache eggs, and that's what you're going to use for a core. You're going to want some form of aluminum foil. Now you can use whatever you have at home. I've used the heavy duty stuff. All it does is make your egg a little bit more bulky because it's thicker stuff. So I personally recommend, unless you're doing the bigger egg, I recommend sticking with just regular old super cheap aluminum foil, but it's kind of whatever you have at home. Because eventually, and I'll show you guys, we're going to be turning this into this. It's just basically to cover it and give it a flat bottom, because I have tried putting eggs or clay directly onto this and it bubbles and it doesn't stick. So the aluminum foil gives the clay something to adhere to. Okay, what else are we going to need? I personally just use I have a silicone baking mat that I got at a craft store, but anything that you want to lay down that is a flat surface, whether you have like a little glass tabletop or some whatever you want to use. Don't use aluminum foil because it crinkles. Just use some kind of hard flat surface that you can clean up afterwards. You're gonna want some kind of a baking sheet. Okay, go back inside and I'll be in there in just a second with the clay and we'll make those, okay?
No, you can't come in yet.
Okay, I won't come in yet. She wants to help with the dragon eggs. I told her I was just making a video. This is what I use for a baking sheet. I just have just a pan with some parchment paper at the bottom. Just something, because you're gonna bake this in the oven, so something that you can bake this on. I also recommend putting some kind of parchment paper at the bottom if you have it. Don't go out and buy it if you don't have it, but the only reason is because when you set your egg on top of a surface like this, once it bakes, it kind of just creates like a flat, shiny surface as opposed to like, you can just tell where it's been baked, but it's going to be the bottom of your egg, so it's not a huge deal. I just personally put parchment paper on when I'm baking. That's just something that I do. So I personally use a pasta machine to roll out my clay to make the scales. Now, if you don't have a pasta machine, please don't fret. You can always use a rolling pin, preferably a silicone one. The wood ones, I mean, they work for clay, but it's probably going to stain your rolling pin, and I don't know if you're going to want to use it for eating after that. But I have found that the pasta machines, I got mine for like 25 bucks at a craft store. It works as far as keeping it a very uniform thing. Like, when I go through and I cover my entire egg first, I use a number 7, and then when I use the scales, I use a number 3. So for me personally, I use a pasta machine. Please don't go out and spend a ton of money. If you don't have one, you can just use a rolling pin or use your hands and just get it as even as possible. That works just fine. You're going to need your clay. So any kind of bakeable clay will work for this. As I've worked with them over the years, I found that different brands do different things. Like, Primo is a little bit harder to work with as far as like right out of the package, but it seems to hold its shape a little bit better, whereas Sculpey is easier to work with out of the package, but it's a little bit softer, so it kind of has like more of a sticky consistency when you're putting your eggs on, especially if you decide to put texture on it with a toothbrush. So I really like working with Primo, but I have a whole bin over here of all kinds of, this is Souffle from Sculpey. I really like the color green because I have black and green that I'm using today. So any kind of oven bake clay. There's also Fimo is out there, so please don't fret over the brand that you have. There's different brands all over the world, so bakeable clay. Okay. Couple of little extra tools. You can very easily just use a toothpick. This is just this is a needlepoint tool that I have, that I have a bunch of different clay tools that I've gotten over the years. So some kind of pointy object, toothpicks work great for this. Just in case you want to we're going to put an eyelet on ours, or on mine personally, because I want to hang it. I'm going to hang it right there above my Ganesh. But if you don't want to hang it, you don't have to worry about this part, but these I got for like $1 for like 50 of them at a craft store. So that's just what that's for. Excuse me, some kind of a knife, some kind of sharp cutting implement to cut your clay. So this is what I personally use to make my scales. Now this is just a leaf shape cutter used for clay. I found it in the clay section at Hobby Lobby or Joann's, either one. They both have them, and it came in a little set of like a star, a circle, a square, and then it had this leaf. This is what I personally use for scales. You can use whatever you want. You can use a circle or a square, whatever shape floats your boat. I've tried them all. This is what seems to work the best and look the best for me personally. You can also cut them out individually, which probably won't be too terrible since we have a mini egg. It's just going to take you a lot longer. And these weren't that expensive, but this is what I use for scales. And then I also use a Q-tip to be able to push any scales out that get stuck in the cutting process, so that the flat end, or the flat end, oh my gosh, the soft end of the Q-tip helps it so that it doesn't make a bunch of imprints, because I have nails, and so pushing it out with my finger, it makes imprints from my nails, so I just use a Q-tip. I've made this video like 4 different times because every time I finish I realize that I forget something. I think that that's it as far as the clay actually making the dragon egg portion of it. So that's what you're going to need for the actual egg. Let's run downstairs and talk about the magical side of things. Okay, I really should post the video that I just tried to make down here as like an extras video, like a blooper video at the end of this, because oh my god, I just had 2 of my animals and my daughter in here, and they were playing with balloons and balls, and I was trying to do this and it ended up just not working. So anyway, let's talk about the magical components that we're going to put in the dragon egg. Now I want to preface this by saying I really want you to use what works for you. This is your protection dragon's egg. This is your amulet. This is your spell. You are doing it. I am just telling you how I do mine. So if you have herbs that I'm using that don't call to you, or you have things that you like that do call to you, please use the ingredients that you want to use. I just know that people are going to ask me what I put in it, and so I figured I would just tell you up front what I'm putting in it to maybe either give you some ideas, or for people that are beginners to give them somewhere to start or whatever. Okay, so first off, this is probably going to surprise some people, but I use Hawthorne. This is Hawthorne leaf and flower. I use Hawthorne in so many things that Hawthorne isn't usually used for, and honestly, at this point, I can't even tell you what the books tell you about Hawthorne. Actually, you know what? We have a second. Let's look. Excuse my bum. Oh boy. Oh, it's over here. Oh my god, of course it's at the literal bottom of it. So Hawthorne, let's just look and see what it's actually supposed to be used for. Maybe I'm using it right. Hawthorne is used for fertility, chastity, fishing magic, and happiness. I don't use Hawthorne for any of those things. So for me personally, Hawthorne is very powerful in protection. I use it in a ton of my protection stuff. I actually use it all the time in things that the books don't call for it, but it's a personal herb for me that I really enjoy using in protection stuff. It just has that protection energy to it. So I'm using Hawthorne.
This is not a noisy ball.
Okay, make sure you shut the door. Hawthorne. I'm just not supposed to make this today. Next I'm gonna use this.
Strong because it can bounce.
Next I'm gonna use this cinnamon. Cinnamon is a very, very protective herb, plant, powder, stick, whatever you want to call it. You can use it in stick form, you can use it in powder form. I might actually use both. I might crush up some of the stick and put some in this because cinnamon is amazing for protection purposes. Another herb that, well, it's not an herb, I apologize, a resin that is amazing for protection is dragon's blood. I have become a huge lover of dragon's blood recently, and so when I do my actual magical workings over the protection egg, I will also be burning dragon's blood incense. So if you have dragon's blood, the powder is going to work the best because you don't want to put a whole chunk of resin that's inside of the egg in the oven. I feel like that could make a mess. So if you're going to use the resin, which it looks like most of mine's powdered anyway, but if you're going to use the resin and you have a chunk, you're going to want to make sure that you take and you crush it up into powder form before you put it in there. So I'm going to use dragon's blood.
Breaking it.
I see it, honey. So then the last thing that I'm going to use is I'm going to powder, I'm not going to powder them, but I'm going to crush them up. Sage and sweetgrass. So this is sage that I have personally grown in my garden, and this is sweetgrass. I think I have bought it somewhere. The reason that I'm using sage and sweetgrass, which sounds ridiculous in a protection thing, but hear me out. When I'm going to make a protection amulet, it's going to be hanging for a long period of time. When negative crap comes at it and it is warded off, you know, I personally feel like that energy kind of, it gets stuck there. So very similar to like the witch's ball, the protection witch's ball that I had you guys do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put sage in there to help keep the egg constantly cleansed, and then sweetgrass to help fill, because as I've told you guys in the past, when you go through and you do a smudging, you smudge with sage, and then usually you go in afterwards with another herb to fill that void that you've created with sage, and sweetgrass is that positive, loving energy. So I am going to put in a tiny piece of sweetgrass along with the sage.
That's too big.
I don't want to bang that right now, but I'm almost done with this and then we can,
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to put the sage in to keep the egg constantly cleansed, and the sweetgrass in to just kind of fill the void that sage is creating as it's cleansing. Now, the other herbs that are a part of that are also filling that void with protection energy, but I feel like you can't have too much like happy, positive, bouncy energy. So that's why the sweetgrass is going in there, because I really like the combination of sage and sweetgrass. So that's what I'm putting in my egg. Hawthorne, cinnamon, dragon's blood, a sprig of sage, and a piece of sweetgrass. You know, if you're going to if you're going to powder anything up, you're going to want a mortar and pestle, and then I will do my magical workings after. So I'll have my candles, I'll have my incense, I'll have all of that, but this is just what we're using to fill the egg. So thank you guys for watching part 1 of this video. This is just everything that we're going to need to actually make our dragon's egg. Now we can move on to part 2, and don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I am going to make a part 2. It is coming. So I hope you guys have an awesome day. Go gather your ingredients, and I will see you very shortly for part 2 on how to make